Welcome back, everyone, to our main stage and our last and final speaker for today's summit. Let us welcome Faraz Fadavi. Faraz is the co-founder of Ascent Autism, which provides group therapy for individuals with autism. Ascent Autism uses artificial intelligence to understand social skills metrics and provide personalized care plans for each participant. Such an important and great topic. I'm so happy to have you here, Faraz, and talking about tools for children with autism.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm extremely happy to be here, and thank you for inviting us over. I'm looking forward to talking about tools and therapies for children with autism. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I think Nicole will read some of them out at the end of the presentation. And I'd love to get into the discussions. And if at any time you guys want to chat with me further, feel free to reach out to me. I'll include my information, contact information at the end of the presentation for you guys to reach out. So let me start my presentation. Okay. If you can't see my screen, let me know, please. But I'm going to talk about tools and therapies for children with autism. My own background is I studied computer science and AI at Stanford University and started businesses in the healthcare space. And most recently is Ascent Autism, where we spent over a year conducting interviews with families in order to understand the challenges that they faced and began doing social skills group therapy. But I'm not going to talk about that quite yet, as I want to talk about some other topics that are relevant and important. So the mental health space is rising very rapidly. 1 in 5 US adults experience mental illness, and 1 in 20 of those US adults experience serious mental illnesses. And this is also impacting the youth. So 17% of individuals between the ages of 6 and 17 years old experience mental health disorders. This rise in mental health is most dramatic in autism. In the year 2000, 1 in 150 newborns were diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And as of this year, it's 1 in 36. When I first got started with Ascent Autism, that number was 1 in 54. So the acceleration that we're seeing is dramatic. And in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association released the 5th edition of what's known as DSM-5. And this is the standard reference that healthcare providers use to diagnose mental and behavioral conditions, including autism. There are 4 criteria that need to be met in order for autism to be diagnosed. The first is persistent deficiencies in social communication and social interactions across contexts, and they manifest in all of these 3 ways. One is deficient in social emotional reciprocity, deficient in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interactions, and deficiencies in developing and maintaining relationships. B is restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. And it has to manifest in at least 2 of the following 4, which is stereotyped or repetitive speech, excessive adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior, highly restricted fixated interests that are abnormal intensity and focus, and hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory inputs or unusual interest in sensory aspects of environments. And lastly, is symptoms must be present in early childhood, and the symptoms together limit and impair everyday functioning. We've seen autism be displayed in popular culture quite a bit, and I think it's increasing in frequency all the way from Dr. Sheldon Cooper to Forrest Gump, Boo Radley in Kill a Mockingbird and Rain Man. And wanted to share what this looks like in popular culture, just a little bit lighthearted tone.
First, there was PlayStation, aka PS1. Then there's PS2, PS3, and now PS4. And that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox, there'd be Xbox 2. But no. Next came Xbox 360. And now, after 360, comes Xbox One. Why one? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put into naming it.
Can you get the butter, please?
You know, however, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard.
All right. So what does the symptoms of autism look like? Well, there's a series of autism symptoms that we can put into categories. One of them would be social communication challenges, and these typically show up in forms of spoken language, the gestures, eye contacts, facial expressions, tones of voice. And those kind of things are the ways that social communication challenges manifest for individuals with autism. Emotional related challenges can include difficulties around recognizing emotions and intentions of others, recognizing one's own emotions, expressing emotions, seeking emotional comfort from others, feeling overwhelmed in social situations, taking turns in conversations, or gauging personal space in those social situations. And behavioral challenges can come up as well around repetitive body movements, repetitive motions with objects, such as spinning wheels or shaking sticks or flipping levers, staring at lights or spinning objects, ritualistic behaviors like lining up objects, narrow or extreme interests in specific topics, and the need for unvarying routines or resistance to change. Now, the types of therapies that exist for autism are growing. As I showed in the first few slides, the rate of autism has been increasing. So the field has just expanded and the demand for services has increased dramatically. So new forms of therapies are popping up that are being proven to be effective. But these are some of the ones that are very popular today. And I'm going to be talking about some of the ones that to note are the behavioral approaches, the developmental approaches, the educational approaches, the social relational approaches. There are also pharmacological, psychological, and other complementary and alternative therapies, but I'm not going to talk about them today. I'm happy to get into them if you'd like offline and want to reach out to me. So behavioral therapy approaches for autism are focused on modifying behaviors and teaching new skills to individuals with autism. As you've heard today, applied behavioral analysis is a widely used and evidence-based behavioral therapy approach for autism. ABA uses reinforcement to increase desired behaviors and decrease unwanted behaviors. The techniques include prompting, shaping, chaining, fading, those kind of things. And ABA is typically an intensive therapy, which means there's many hours for multiple days a week and can be tailored to each individual's necessary needs. Other behavioral therapy approaches include cognitive behavior therapy, which focuses on changing negative thought patterns, and social skills training, which focuses on social skills and improving social interactions. Then there's developmental approaches, which focus on improving specific developmental skills, such as language skills or physical skills, or a broader range of interconnected developmental abilities. These can include speech and language therapy, which helps improve the person's understanding and use of speech and language. Some people with autism communicate verbally, but it's worth noting that about a third of folks with autism do not communicate verbally and rather use signs, gestures, pictures, or electronic communication devices. There's also occupational therapy, which teaches skills that help the person live as independently as possible. Skills may include dressing, eating, bathing, and other types of physical skills. There's also sensory integration therapy, which helps to improve responses to sensory inputs that may be restrictive or overwhelming. And then there's physical therapy, which can improve physical skills such as fine movements of fingers and larger movements of your body. There are educational approaches. Educational approaches are basically functions that are happening within the school environment. And one type of educational approach is the TEACH method, which is the treatment and education of autistic and related communication handicapped children. It's a mouthful. TEACH is based on the idea that people with autism thrive on consistency and visual learning. So it provides teachers with ways to adjust the classroom structure and improve academic and other outcomes. For example, daily routines can be written or drawn and placed in clear sight for the children to see. The boundaries can be set around learning stations. And then there's also social relational approaches, which is the last approach that I'm going to be talking about today. Social relational approaches focus on identifying the social skills gaps which the child has and creating a system in order to identify what those deficiencies are and address them in a social manner. So pairing them with other individuals that they can interact with. So this is what Ascent Autism does. We started Ascent Autism back in 2020, where we spent an entire year conducting interviews through the University of California, San Francisco's Autism Center in order to identify what the challenges individuals and families that had children on the autism spectrum faced. And what we found is that, especially as the children get older, there is an intense fear that arises about the child's ability to socialize and interact with other individuals in the local community, whether that be for professional relationships, such as a school environment where they're collaborating on group projects, or whether that be on friendships that they form within their local community. Those social emotional skills and having those tools in their tool belt was incredibly important in order to combat things like social isolation, depression, loneliness, and also an ability to work in group environments and professional environments. So what does Ascent Autism's social skills group therapy look like? Well, we pair 5 to 7 individuals that are a very strong fit for one another across their strengths, challenges, interest, age, and availability into a group that meets on a regular basis and is led by our facilitators. The facilitators' goal for the group are to provide, in order there to enable to make the kids have social emotional bonds with one another, which essentially means become friends with one another, in order to help them develop their social skills within the group environment, and then lastly, in order to generalize those skills to their local community and beyond. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, my own background is in artificial intelligence, and we've taken the principles of artificial intelligence and applied it to what we're doing at Ascent Autism. So we've developed algorithms to run on every single group therapy session that we run in order to identify key social skills metrics for each of the learners for every single session. These metrics include talk time, talk frequency, number of questions asked, number of responses made, whether the responses or questions were prompted or unprompted, and a whole host of other metrics. And we use these metrics to, on the one hand, inform our facilitators about the progress that each child is making and help the facilitator to tailor and individualize the program to the needs of each individual child. And also on the back end, we study the aggregate data in order to identify how the kids are progressing in our program. And one of the metrics that we look at is what we call balanced speech production. Balanced speech production is the idea that if we have 5 individuals in a group program together, they should each, in ideality, be taking up 1/5 of the talk time and talk frequency for that conversation. And what we find is that folks that come to us are historically either under communicators, meaning they barely talk at all, or over communicators, meaning they talk too much. And individuals that joined our program within just 2 months that were historically under communicators saw an improvement in their balanced speech production of 57.4%. And individuals that are historically over communicators improved their balanced speech production in just 2 months by 46.6%. I also wanted to include some references for you guys, and I'm happy to, again, talk about any of these at any point in the Q&A section, but also feel free to reach out to me at Ascent Autism. Let me stop sharing. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Faraz, so much for your presentation. Let's see if we have any questions to your topic. It needs a couple of seconds for the comments to come in.
One of them is Atypical is a great show on Netflix about a teacher on the spectrum. I've heard great things. I have to watch it.
You have to. It's great. I love it. It's funny, and it just explains, I think, how an autism or a person on the spectrum, like the different stages from school to like university and what challenges comes with that. So I think that's very interesting.
Definitely.
What was your, Faraz, do you have, like, what was your most motivation behind all this?
So it's both me and my co-founder's motivations. So I
Mhm.
should tell you a little about my co-founder as well. She'll be talking here tomorrow.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So my co-founder, she studied autism for 10 plus years at the Stanford School
Mhm.
of Medicine, published papers in Nature, super, super talented and famous in the field. And, you know, I spent a lot of time with her working on my first business, and she was working on her first business as well. And she would work with folks on the spectrum, and I was taken aback by the challenges that were faced and the limited opportunities folks had to solve those challenges.
Right.
Number of folks working on the field, and I felt that it was a life really well spent if I could make an impact on this field. That would be a fantastic thing to do for the world.
Great. I have some questions coming up.
Yeah.
Maybe we can look at them. Nicole nicely asked, how large are the peer groups?
The peer groups are between 5 to 7 individuals that are highly compatible with one another.
Okay, great. Next question would be, are there any tools you recommend for children with autism that are also good tools to play with siblings?
You know, this is a fantastic question, and it's one that we face all the time. So we get individuals that are highly compatible for one another in order to participate in group sessions together, and we have to find those tools. I can list a few, but I can also connect you with some of our learning specialists who were extremely talented in answering that question. So I think the tools that work well are ones that are engaging and fun games, but that fundamentally require communication as part of the gameplay. So for instance, things like Scribble.io or whatever that don't require communication would not be a great fit. But if you can find a game that as part of the actual engagement and the interest that the child has, causes there to be communication between them, and especially if they're playing that with their siblings, I think those are the things to look for, and making sure the kids are engaged.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. I will just keep maybe 2 more questions. I see Angela is asking, do they match the kids by location?
So the broad answer is no. The emphasis is placed on finding folks that are highly compatible with one another. What we found in our conversations with families is that the quality of the match is incredibly important. And if you do on a small vicinity, like a 30-mile radius around you, it's incredibly difficult to find folks that are going to be a match with your kid across their strengths, challenges, interests, and age. So we place the emphasis on making sure that kids are a strong match first. After that, then we try to ideally make it be in a vicinity around you. But the guarantee is on the quality of the compatibility rather than the location.
Got it. Okay, perfect. And the last question is from Spring Mingy. Sorry. How do you determine compatibility?
So we determine compatibility based on a score that we've created. All of our families go through an assessment process where they speak to one of our assessors, who also runs groups as well. And those assessors will identify the individual's strengths, challenges, age, interest, and have a conversation both with the parents and with the kids themselves in order to determine these things. And we've created our own system of metrics that we score all these things on and match it based on that.
Perfect. Well, Faraz, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was super interesting. It was a pleasure to have you here and just a great session with you. I hope I'll see you soon.
Of course.
Thank you so much.